I was born in Des Moines, and my family lived in Newton. My dad worked for the Maytag Company, which was headquartered in Newton. And when I was 3, we moved to Pueblo, and he was the regional manager for the southern part of Colorado and the northern part of New Mexico for the Maytag Company. I ended up going to grade school at Lincoln, Keating Junior High, and then Central High School. It was a great experience for me, and I'm still very fond of Pueblo as a community. But it's still a great place to grow up. Our first house was a block and a half from the old airport El Pueblo Museum. I came to Colorado Springs in 1960 and started at Colorado College and enjoyed my 4 years there, and had the great opportunity to participate as president of my fraternity, and then for a couple of years president of the Interfraternity Council. And I'll tell you, it really gave you insight into dealing with people and understanding that the compromise is the name of the game. Because if you're going to get things done, you have to get everyone behind you. In 1964, I started as the University of Colorado Law School. It was, to begin with, a real experience. A lot of smart people, and I was thinking, how can these people all be so smart? As they would interact with the professors, questions, answers in class. And I thought to myself, do you really belong here? The fact is that it turned out well, and I think I'm very proud of the fact that I have had a chance to go to the University of Colorado Law School and graduate, and my youngest son, Kyle, is a graduate of the University of Colorado Law School, and my oldest grandson, Logan, who now works in Denver, is also a graduate, so I really like that. I was in the ROTC program at Colorado College and was commissioned a second lieutenant upon graduation. The Army gave me a deferment to go to law school, and after law school I had a chance to go to infantry school at Fort Benning, Georgia, and then to the NSA school at Fort Devens. The Army has a branch of NSA called the Army Security Agency, and which was electronic intercept, basically. And then we were off to, Kathy and I were off to an unaccompanied tour in Asmara, Ethiopia. And we lived there for a year and a half. We lived on the economy, and it was an experience. But our first son, BJ, was born there. I'd passed the bar, and they actually swore me into the Colorado bar at Fort Benning, Georgia. The Judge Advocate General at Fort Benning swore me in, and they brought me in from the field, and here I'm there in infantry school, covered with mud, and here are all these captains that are part of the JAG Corps. And the colonel, I remember, he said, "You sure you want to stay like this? Look how we live." But the fact is, I stayed in intelligence, and what an experience living in a third world country, and with a good mission, because it was electronic intercept. It was classified then, but this is before satellites. Microwaves were used as we were, or cable under the sea to communicate with the U.S. Satellites weren't here yet, so a different world. I applied to Bob Russell, who was our district attorney, and during the summer of my junior year in law school, I was a bailiff at the 4th Judicial District, and I got to know the DA. He had indicated at that time, you know, when I'm ready to practice, he can always use more deputy DAs with backgrounds similar to mine, which included the military service. And so September 1 of 1969, I started in the DA's office as a deputy DA. The circumstances were truly fortunate for me. I was running the county court, and I think we had 4 courts then. And the number 2 person, the assistant district attorney, retired. Bob liked the way I moved paper around, and he said, I'm going to make you the assistant. I'm 27 years old. Since then, I've gotten smarter, but I thought I was pretty smart then. The fact is, I didn't know a lot, but it was a real experience, whether it was trying murder cases or whether it was dealing with the, I think, 24 deputy DAs that all had different interests, different programs, different goals. And it was 2 counties in the 4th Judicial District, Teller, that's Cripple Creek basically, and El Paso. There are a lot of experiences there that I think really have been helpful as I've gone forward. I ran a grand jury in Teller County, and I'm really an outsider to them because that mining community is pretty insular. I think less insular now because of gambling, but it was very insular at the time, and they certainly made me aware that they really didn't appreciate me coming up and running a grand jury. Universally, they told me they didn't like that because the president of the bank and the executive vice president was a homicide-suicide. So, they all had their accounts in this bank, and that was about Cripple Creek, not some guy coming up here from Colorado Springs. In 1972, I decided that, I'd been complaining about a lot of things that had been going on in the legislature, so maybe it was time that I put up or shut up. So I ran in the 18th district here in Colorado Springs, which is basically the northeast part of town. It was quite an experience, a 3-way primary and a 3-way general, dealing with people and going door to door and understanding what they really wanted me to hear, not what I thought they wanted, but they told me directly. And that was a great opportunity for me to be in the legislature. I was the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, and Ron Straley, who was the chair, was gone a lot. So I ran the committee quite often. Even then, I was concerned about the scar on the mountain north of town, and we passed remedial legislation in '73, which had an impact, and I think a positive impact on communities, and trying to make sure that if you're going to have major extraction going on, let's keep it out of the communities themselves. We have a lot of open land where we can do that. I was a member of the Education Committee, and I have a real interest because I've watched it through the years. I watched it with the Olympic Committee, and I've watched it here in our community with the Pomar Foundation and around the state. The time to make a real difference is much earlier in a young person's life, is much earlier than we might think. We all want great communities. Everybody does. One of the ways we do that is making sure that we have programs, projects that really address issues confronted by young people. By young people, that's pre-college age, so probably 18 or 19. And we've done some work. As I look around, it truly is distressing to see the mental health issues that have arisen with young people, 9, 10, 11, 12. And I don't know what the cause is. There are probably a lot of contributing causes. There's no question that if we don't have family support and if we don't have a set of values that we all can subscribe to in a general way, it makes it very difficult for people to know who they are or where they are. Ben Wendelken, who was the Vice President and Counsel of the Broadmoor and El Pomar Foundation and a couple other companies, I had a case with him. His client had missed a deadline, and this was a real lesson for me. I pointed it out to Mr. Wendelken, and he read through the papers again. He took out his personal checkbook and wrote my client a check for $15,000. I asked him at the time, I said, don't you have insurance? He said, insurance didn't make this mistake, I did. And I said, wow, what a guy. And before I left his office that day, He said, have you ever thought about doing something different? And I gave the logical response, well, what do you have in mind? He said that, you know, we have some real opportunities at El Pomar Foundation in the Broadmoor because the law is changing under the 69 Tax Reform Act. He said, we really need to get on top of this. And he said, I'd like to take you out and have you talk with the folks that run the place. And that at the time was Russell Tutt and his brother Thayer and Mr. Wendelken. They were really the principals. El Pomar Foundation had a board of 5 at the time. I talked with them, and I'll never forget. And remember, I'm, 29 years old now. We were getting in the car, and Mr. Wendelken said, now, you know the youngest person on the board is 63 years old, and you're 29. He said, does this look like an opportunity for you? Mr. Wendelken stayed on the board till he was 92 when he passed, and to the end, he was with it and was a great contributor, and he protected me more than once, let me tell you, because I needed it. I started, as I indicated, September 1st of 1973 as Vice President and Counsel of the Broadmoor and Vice President and Executive Director of El Pomar Foundation. In fact, I was the very first employee of El Pomar Foundation because previously it had been run by the hotel. It kind of had it inverted. It was like the hotel had a foundation rather than the foundation owned the hotel. But the Tax Reform Act was going to make us square that up. As I sit here and face you today, we're at Penrose House, which is a conference facility for nonprofits and governmental entities. This was where Mr. and Mrs. Penrose lived. After he died in 1939, Mrs. Penrose, 1942, I believe, gave to the Sisters of Charity of Cincinnati, and they ran it as a retreat house. It was a residential retreat. People actually lived here or would come here for retreats. Sister Myra James, who was a dynamo and president of Penrose Hospital. I was with her at the opening, I think it was United Way at the Four Seasons, and we were talking, and this is now February of '92, and she says, hey, you know, we're going to sell Penrose, they called Julie Penrose House at the time, Julie Penrose House, and we have a developer, and he's going to tear it down and put up 29 very nice single-family homes. And I said, whoa, whoa. I said, this is the part that gets a little shaky. I said, we'll match that. I had no authority. I said, we'll match that, and I believe it was $3.2 million. And she says, well, it's yours then. Then I had to go back and talk with the trustees and say, hey, you know, I was standing there because we were making grants probably at $4.5, $5 million a year. And I said, you know, I've agreed to buy this and I really need your support on it. Since the trustees or directors, any real estate has to be approved when you buy or sell. I remember Carl Idle, the president of the Broadmoor, great guy. He said, well, after the meeting, he said, we have a white elephant here. And I said, no, I said, I think we can do it. We then spent $6 million renovating it, which, you know, but yet we had to. HVAC, air conditioning, had to do, there used to be an elevator here, and we took out this little elevator and put in a real one. But the point was, 6 months later, Carl and I are standing together, reception here, and Carl says to the two people we're talking with, he said, boy, we were smart buying this building. I said, Carl? And he says, oh yeah, well, you know, it's really worked out. If you look at El Pomar and its close ties to this community, I think what we've really expanded is we have 11 regions around the state, and we have 6 or 7 community members in each region. And they meet and they have a budget where they actually can recommend grants up to $600,000 every 3 years. We're listening to them rather than them listening to us about what the needs are. And it's truly, I think, made a difference. And where it's made a difference is in rural Colorado. Outside the metropolitan Denver area, the impact has been substantial and I think effective. Since I've been with El Pomar, I think that the number in grants is something on the order of 400 million. We have certainly tried to address as a foundation healthcare needs around the state. I was at the 1988 Olympic Games in Seoul, Korea, and I had a stroke. I had an aneurysm in the back of my head that burst. They gave me great treatment at the Army facility there, and it really made a difference. They medevaced me from Tokyo to the neurological hospital in San Francisco. It was on that flight as I had a doctor and 2 attendants. They had me on a flatbed and they were doing everything they could to keep me alive. It was an epiphany. I reflected on, how they were doing so much for me, but what about others that don't have that ability, that don't have either the income or the access to have that sort of treatment? And when I got back, I asked Bishop Hannafin, the Catholic Bishop of Southern Colorado, and my physician, Jim Smith, I said, what can we do to make a difference? Jim Smith says, well, you should go down to the community. It was called Community Health at the time. It was down on Wasatch. They served hundreds of people, not thousands, hundreds each year, but they had a great mission. They just didn't have the facilities or funding. So in consultation with the hospitals here, who stepped up and offered if we were to build a facility for what is now Peak Vista, they said they could get the volunteers, the physicians, and the nursing staff to really help. It now, last year, served 75,000 people, 24 clinics, and total number of visits, because there were repeat visits, about 350,000. El Pomar, under the leadership particularly of Matt Carpenter, the executive vice president, and his staff have really put together funding through the years which supports rural health care. And we do some with telehealth, but still you need people on the ground, a place to go, someone to see, and that's why Peak Vista has made a difference, not just here, but they're throughout southern Colorado, in the rural areas, and making available the expertise they have. And this has really become important because of the consolidation of nonprofit and for-profit hospitals, which means many hospitals have been left behind. We continue to fund them. We fund them because they are providing the sort of health care access to individuals that are uninsured, underinsured, and even if they are insured, then they get the full insurance out of it. But they do something on the order of $13 million a year in uncompensated care. That's really important because for all of us, if we're not healthy, the other stuff is secondary. And anything that El Pomar can do, and the trustees have said this a number of times, to lessen that burden, make the load lighter for people, we should be doing it. And I think that this foundation has made a difference, but it has everything to do with the commitment of all 70 people that work for El Pomar in advancing the community and advancing the state. There's no question that we couldn't do it, we being the trustees, without the great staff and the commitment they have to the state, this community, and to Metro Denver and small communities. The trustees gave me a leave of absence in 1981. I went back as special counsel to the president the day of inauguration and dealt with issues of the transition from President Carter to President Reagan, particularly the issues associated with the Russian invasion of Afghanistan, where President Carter boycotted the Olympics in 1980 in Moscow and also had a series of grain embargoes. Mike Devers, the guy that told me, he said, you need to figure out how we get through this, because the president was concerned about what had happened to the Olympics and where it was going to go from there. Interestingly enough, and this is timely, I sat in the room a number of times when the president was either talking with the cabinet or talking with leaders, sitting in the back. I want to make that really clear. I was in the back. But I still heard what went on, and every meeting, at least the ones I was in, Ronald Reagan, as President of the United States, said, I heard a joke. Did you hear about, and he'd go on, he'd start laughing, everybody, but it set a tone. It set a tone of friendliness. It set a tone that he cared. I've been at a press conference where he, and I think he did this numerous times, where Ronald Reagan, they were talking about Tip O'Neill had said something about him. And it was really a baited question. Now you get angry answers, I'm sure. President Reagan just looked over and said, you know how he is. And then next question. But what a nice way to handle it. Non-confrontational, non-belligerent, and you get something done that way. I'm probably the worst athlete to ever be president of the United States Olympic Committee. It was a great experience, and I have so much admiration for the commitment that the athletes have, their coaches have, and how they splendidly represent the United States of America, both in the Olympics and the Paralympics. If there's one thing we can continue to be proud of, it's the athletes in the Olympic movement, and those athletes that actually don't make the team, but they're out there doing their best, achieving a great deal, and I think it's an inspiration for all of us as we watch those athletes. I chaired it twice in 1990 and 91, and then I was elected to a full term in 96 through 2000. So I was the president during 4 Olympic Games. And I've been to 17 Olympic Games, and I never get tired of it. Never. The Olympic Games in 2024 in Paris, and for the last over 100 years since 1896, have been a rallying point, a true rallying point for people to look and expect the best. The Olympics are a great platform for public diplomacy. The interaction that the athletes, the coaches have with others from other countries, even if maybe our official policy is somewhat hostile, the personal policy, the personal exchanges, the ability to really get to know someone as a person, not as someone from whatever country. And I think it is one of the true areas where we should really not only celebrate, but we should make sure that we don't do anything which would denigrate the games and cause this sort of public diplomacy to disappear. There's always going to be a reason. Don't like this country did that, that country did this. But the fact is, we are better served to have the games, have the countries, and have the athletes, coaches, and the trainers be in a position to interact with each other. I'm a real advocate of that. Currently, in 2024, I believe the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee is well run, and the leadership, Gene Sykes, who's the chair, the president, and we're the only one to call it the chair. Every other country around the world calls the chief volunteer the president. So it's both. Domestic, it's the chair. Overseas, it's the president. But Gene Sykes, certainly Sarah Hirschland, the CEO, she's done a very good job because she's created the sort of economic base with individuals and also with sponsors that will allow this team to be fully funded. And that doesn't mean it's over. Fundraising's ongoing. That never stops. But I'm certainly pleased that we have a full team. I think 591 athletes going to Paris. And I think they're going to do well. But they're going to do well in addition to that because of the interaction they have with people from around the world. You know, there are people-to-people programs, and those are great. But this is the same thing. As we sit here in 2024, there are 22 national governing bodies located here. The Olympic Committee moved here in 1977, and there were a lot of people that truly made a difference. The executive director, Don Miller, President Crum, who was the president at the time, and then Thayer Tutt. Amateur sports has played a huge role here, for the state though. We have the Olympics coming, of course, in 28 to Los Angeles, back here in the United States, and then they'll be back in 34 for the Winter Games in Salt Lake City. I do have to commend the Winter Games in 22, that's 2002, in Salt Lake City, were really put together and made a tremendous success by Mitt Romney, who came in later, and Mike Leavitt, the governor. They really put together, because it was faltering, and there were a lot of questions as to the way they got the bid, and were there bribes, were there considerations given, and Mitt Romney and Mike Leavitt got in there and cleaned that up. The Salt Lake City scandal actually had a benefit for me in that I didn't realize it at the time, but the president of the International Olympic Committee, Juan Antonio Samaranch, called me and he said, we're going to have an investigation. We're going to look into the sort of behavior that occurred. Have there been any bribes? Have there been any consideration of any kind? He said, I'm going to appoint a blue ribbon panel to look into this, and he said, I'd like to have you serve. And I said, well, sure, who else is going to be on it? And he said, forget the first name, but it's Agnelli, the owners of the family that owns Fiat. And he said, Henry Kissinger. And I said, wow. And I said, do you know Henry Kissinger? And he says, no, but I'm going to call him. I said, why don't I call him for you? I didn't know him either. So it was just a case where, you know, I wanted to know him. And so I called him. He was terrific. He's a sports guy, and to my great joy, I got to travel with him a number of times. And he taught me one thing. Probably taught me a lot of things, but the one thing, he always was short, clear, and precise. You know, if somebody could go on for an hour, he'd say in about 15 seconds, well, these are the 3 issues. Well, what a gift. And what a great time to be with him at a number of games. I'm honored to have the William J. Hybl Sports Performance Center at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. Well, I'm thrilled about that, but not as much as my grandkids. They think it's great. They stand out in front, say, hey, you know, and they're better athletes than I am. I feel very honored and certainly fortunate to have my name on that world-class facility. People are coming all over the United States for the work they do there, for rehabilitation, and certainly the sort of thing that is necessary for world-class athletes. The Olympic Committee uses it a lot. Police and fire use it. and yeah, I'm really thrilled about it. The United States Air Force Academy, which is north of Colorado Springs, has had a tremendous impact on this community. And I don't mean the football season. I'm talking about the impact the cadets have. They've been involved with a lot that has gone on. Individual homes have them in. But it's the standards they set. It's the morals they have and the guidelines they operate under. I think we can all be very proud of the United States Air Force Academy and the good leadership the Academy has had. Now, there's always going to be people saying, well, what about this, what about that? The fact is, what is the total product, what is the impact, and the difference? No, the Air Force Academy is great. Of course, they started in Denver out at Lowry Air Force Base, I think 58 and 59, before they moved to Colorado Springs. I can't say enough good things about the cadets that graduate and become lieutenants in the United States Air Force. The award is Community Champion for Lifetime Achievement, and I will tell you, there are a lot of people that deserve this award with me that have really helped. And my family's been very supportive through all this time. My late wife, Kathy, was one who certainly, on her own, volunteered to help people, but she always encouraged me, and she encouraged our family to give back. No matter what else happens, there are people out there that need our assistance, need our funding, and more importantly, they need our understanding. I'm very honored and I'm humbled that I'll be receiving this award in October of '24. I've been very fortunate. I've had a lot of great support, and I live in a great state. And there are a lot of people that have truly made a difference to make this a great state. And as we approach another milestone, I'm just glad to be here.